Admiral Vextar leaned back in his command chair, his four eyes scanning the transmission display with obvious amusement. The message had arrived that morning through standard diplomatic channels, but its contents were anything but standard. A species called humans wanted to show off their first warship to the Galactic Council. The Admiral couldn't help but chuckle at their boldness. The holographic screen showed their home planet, Earth. It looked like any other water world, with blue oceans and white clouds swirling around green and brown continents. According to the Galactic database, these humans had only discovered faster-than-light travel about 10 years ago. 10 years. Most civilizations took centuries to build their first proper warship after achieving interstellar flight. "Sir, you need to see this," called out his aide, Lieutenant Zork, approaching with a datapad. "The humans actually think their little ship deserves official recognition from the Council." Admiral Vextar read through the formal request, his amusement growing with each line. These humans were asking for the same recognition given to the mighty hegemony dreadnoughts or the Federation's battle cruisers, ships that had taken thousands of years to perfect, built by civilizations that had conquered entire star systems. Across the chamber, Councillor Thane was having his own reaction to the news. His tentacles writhed and twisted in the way they always did when he was annoyed. "Another upstart species with delusions of grandeur," he muttered to his assistant. "What could these humans possibly show us that we haven't seen 1,000 times before?" The other council members were equally dismissive. Ambassador Krell from the hegemony laughed so hard his scales rattled. "Humans? Are these the same primitives who were still fighting with chemical explosives just 50 years ago?" "The very same," replied Councillor Thane. "Our intelligence reports show they only developed nuclear fusion 25 years ago. Now they think they can build warships that deserve our attention." The council chamber filled with the sound of various species expressing their amusement. Some whistled through breathing holes, others clicked their mandibles, and a few simply roared with laughter. The idea that a species so young and primitive could produce anything worthy of galactic recognition seemed ridiculous. Meanwhile, billions of miles away, Captain Kim stood in the corner of humanity's modest transport vessel. Unlike the massive diplomatic ships favored by other species, the human transport was small and practical. Kim reviewed his mission parameters one final time, knowing that everything depended on the next few hours. Beside him, Commander Park monitored their approach to the meeting coordinates. Her fingers moved quickly across the navigation console, making tiny adjustments to their course. She had served in Earth's space fleet for 15 years, but this mission was unlike anything she had ever done before. "Approach vector looks good," Park reported. "We'll reach the designated coordinates in about 2 hours." She paused, then added quietly, "Captain, are you certain about this approach? We could simply transmit the technical specifications to them. Show them the data, the test results, the engineering reports." Engineer Lee looked up from his workstation. He had been making final adjustments to their ship's systems, ensuring everything would work perfectly when the time came. "The specifications alone won't convince them," he said. "They'll think we made them up or stole the technology from someone else." Kim nodded slowly. He understood his crew's concerns, but he also knew how the galactic community worked. These alien civilizations had been in space for thousands of years. They had seen every type of ship design, every kind of weapon system, every possible innovation. They wouldn't be impressed by numbers on a screen or technical drawings. "They need to see it with their own eyes," Kim said firmly. "Words won't be enough. Data won't be enough. They need to witness what human engineering can accomplish." Commander Park wasn't entirely convinced. "But sir, if we reveal our capabilities too dramatically, won't that seem threatening? These species have been the dominant powers for millennia. They might see us as a challenge to their authority." Kim had considered this possibility many times during the journey. Earth's leaders had debated this exact concern for months before, approving the mission. Some had argued for a more subtle approach, gradually revealing human capabilities over decades rather than all at once. "Sometimes," Kim replied, "the kindest thing you can do is be completely honest from the beginning. If we hide our true capabilities, they'll discover them eventually. Better that they learn the truth in a controlled setting, when we can show them we come in peace." Back at the council headquarters, The bureaucratic process continued. Admiral Vextar processed the formal request with barely hidden contempt. The humans wanted a full audience with the Council, complete with a demonstration of their vessel's capabilities. Standard procedure required that such requests be granted, regardless of how foolish they seemed. Schedule them for next week, Vextar instructed his aide. Third-tier priority. Most of the Council members won't bother attending anyway. The third-tier priority designation was reserved for minor diplomatic matters that posed no real importance to galactic affairs. It meant the meeting would be held in a smaller chamber, with minimal security presence, and most senior council members would send junior representatives instead of attending personally. The council granted the humans their audience, but more, out of bureaucratic obligation than genuine interest. Most delegates planned to attend briefly, make polite conversation for a few minutes, then move on to more pressing galactic matters. After all, what could these primitive humans possibly show them that would be worth their valuable time? The meeting point in neutral space looked like a gathering of the galaxy's most powerful forces. Massive warships from dozens of different civilizations had assembled in perfect formation, creating an impressive display of military might. The hegemony had brought 3 of their largest dreadnoughts, each one stretching over 2 kilometers in length. Their dark hulls bristled with weapon ports and armor plating that could withstand direct hits from nuclear warheads. Floating nearby, the Federation's sleek battle cruisers formed their own formation. These ships looked completely different from the hegemony vessels, all smooth curves and gleaming metal surfaces. Their designs emphasized speed and maneuverability, but everyone knew they packed just as much firepower as their bulkier counterparts. The Zephyrian Empire had sent their newest carrier, a massive ship that could launch hundreds of fighter craft within minutes. Its flight decks were visible through transparent aluminum viewing ports, showing rows upon rows of small attack vessels ready for immediate deployment. Admiral Vextar surveyed the assembled fleet from his flagship's observation deck. The combined presence of so many powerful vessels served a clear purpose: to remind these upstart humans exactly who controlled galactic space. Any species seeing this gathering would understand immediately that the established powers were not to be challenged. Impressive turnout, commented Councillor Thane, his tentacles swaying as he moved closer to the viewing port. Even for a minor diplomatic meeting, we've managed to assemble quite a show of force. The security chief approached with his latest report. Sir, sensors show no sign of the human vessel. We've been scanning for the past 30 minutes, but there's nothing out there except our own ships. Admiral Vextar checked his chronometer. The humans were now 15 minutes late for their scheduled appointment. In galactic diplomacy, punctuality was considered a basic sign of respect. Being late to a council meeting was seen as either incompetence or deliberate insult. Perhaps they've reconsidered their foolish request, the security chief suggested. Seeing our assembled fleet might have convinced them that their little ship isn't worth our attention after all. Several other council members nodded in agreement. It wouldn't be the first time a young species had requested an audience only to back down when they realized the magnitude of what they were attempting. The galaxy had seen dozens of civilizations make bold claims about their military capabilities, only to retreat when faced with the reality of established galactic power. Admiral Vextar was beginning to think the same thing. He reached for his communicator, ready to declare the audience concluded and dismiss the assembled fleet. The various ships had better things to do than wait around for humans who apparently lacked the courage to show up. Just as he was about to make the announcement, a transmission crackled through the communication array. The voice was calm and professional, with a slight accent that suggested the speaker's native language was different from galactic standard. This is Captain Kim, of the Earth vessel Teguki. We apologize for the delay, requesting permission to decloak and approach the assembly. The word decloak hit the fleet like a shockwave. Conversations stopped mid-sentence across dozens of bridge crews. Officers turned to stare at their communication displays, wondering if they had heard correctly. Several species in the galaxy possessed basic stealth technology. The hegemony had developed cloaking devices that could hide small scout ships for short periods. The Federation used similar technology for reconnaissance missions, but these systems were primitive, unreliable, and certainly not something any species would use when approaching a formal council gathering. More importantly, no one had detected anything. The combined sensor arrays of the assembled fleet represented the most advanced detection technology in the galaxy. If there was a cloaked ship nearby, someone should have picked up energy signatures, gravitational distortions, or at least some kind of sensor ghost. "Sir," whispered the security chief, his voice filled with concern, "our sensors still show nothing. If they're really out there, their cloaking technology is beyond anything we've encountered." Admiral Vextar felt his confidence wavering for the first time. He had expected to see a crude vessel hastily assembled from salvaged parts. Instead, he was faced with evidence that the humans possessed technology his sensors couldn't even detect. "Permission granted," Vextar replied, his curiosity now completely overriding his earlier dismissal. What happened next would be remembered in galactic history books for centuries to come. Space itself seemed to shimmer and bend around a point, roughly 5 kilometers from the main fleet formation. Reality appeared to fold in on itself, creating visual distortions that hurt to look at directly. Then, as smoothly as a flower blooming, the human warship materialized. The vessel that appeared defied every expectation the galactic powers had formed about human engineering. Instead of the bulky, crude design they had anticipated, the ship possessed an elegant beauty that was almost artistic in nature. Its hull was angular but graceful, with clean lines that seemed to flow naturally from bow to stern. The ship's surface caught and reflected light from the nearby stars in patterns that seemed almost hypnotic. The hull material appeared to shift and change color slightly as it moved, creating an effect that was both beautiful and unsettling. Engineer Sato sat at her station on the human ship's bridge, monitoring the reactions of the assembled fleet. Her displays lit up with incoming sensor scans as dozens of alien vessels tried to analyze their ship simultaneously. "Captain," she reported to Kim, "their sensor arrays are going crazy. Every ship in the fleet is trying to get readings on our hull composition, our power signatures, our weapon systems. I'm reading massive spikes in their scanning frequencies." Captain Kim nodded, unsurprised by the reaction. The Taiguchi had been designed specifically to challenge galactic assumptions about what human technology could accomplish. The vessel bore no resemblance to any known galactic ship designs. Where other civilizations emphasized bulk and obvious displays of firepower, the human craft appeared deceptively modest. Its weapons weren't visible as external turrets or missile pods. Its engines didn't produce the massive energy signatures, typical of other warships. To the untrained eye, it might have looked almost civilian in nature. But experienced military officers throughout the fleet recognized something far more dangerous. A ship whose true capabilities were completely hidden beneath its clean, almost artistic exterior. "Analysis complete," reported the Federation's chief science officer to his captain. "Sir, I'm not detecting any of the standard weapon systems we're familiar with. No plasma cannons, no missile tubes, no particle beam arrays." "Then how is it a warship?" his captain demanded. "That, sir, is exactly what worries me." Councillor Thane studied the human vessel through his flagship's main viewer, his tentacles twitching with barely controlled irritation. The ship floating before them looked nothing like what he had expected from a primitive species. Still, appearances could be deceiving, and he had seen many civilizations try to compensate for weak technology with fancy hull designs. "Your vessel appears adequate," Councillor Thane announced over the communication channel, though his tone made it clear he thought anything but. "However, we require demonstration of combat capabilities before granting recognition. Any species seeking Council acknowledgement must prove their military worth through standard evaluation procedures." The transmission crackled slightly as Captain Kim's voice came through the speakers. "We would be honored to comply with your evaluation procedures, Councillor. Please transmit the test parameters, and we will begin immediately." Admiral Vextar exchanged glances with his tactical officer. The human captain sounded almost eager to begin the demonstrations. Most species approach these tests with obvious nervousness, knowing that failure would mean immediate dismissal from galactic consideration. "Very well," Vextar announced. "We will begin with basic maneuverability tests. Please execute a series of acceleration and turning maneuvers. Our escort fighters will evaluate your ship's agility and response times." What happened next challenged every assumption the galactic powers held about physics, engineering, and the fundamental nature of spaceflight itself. The Taiguchi began its maneuvers with movements that seemed to mock the laws of motion. Instead of the gradual acceleration curves that governed every other vessel in known space, the human ship simply changed direction instantly. There was no visible buildup of momentum, no energy discharge from maneuvering thrusters, no gravitational stress that should have torn the ship apart. "That's impossible," muttered the hegemony's chief engineer, staring at his sensor readings. "They just executed a 90-degree turn at full speed without any deceleration. The G-forces alone should have liquefied their crew." The Federation's science officer was equally baffled. "Sir, I'm reading thrust vectors that don't correspond to any visible engine ports. It's like they're pushing against space itself rather than using conventional propulsion." On board the Taiguchi, Lieutenant Cho coordinated the defensive demonstrations. From her station at the tactical console, her fingers moved smoothly across the control interface, activating systems that had been perfected in Earth's most classified research facilities. "Defensive systems online," she reported to Captain Kim, "ready for the incoming fire simulation." The Council's escort fighters began their attack runs, using training ammunition that would register hits without causing actual damage. These fighters represented some of the galaxy's finest aerospace technology, piloted by veterans with decades of combat experience. None of it mattered. Specialist Kang managed the weapon systems from his position at the fire control station. As the enemy fighters approached, the Taiguchi's defensive arrays came online with terrifying efficiency. The human ship didn't use conventional point defense weapons like rapid-fire cannons or interceptor missiles. Instead, energy fields seemed to form around the vessel, creating barriers that simply absorbed incoming fire. "Missile lock achieved," reported one of the Federation fighter pilots, firing simulation torpedoes. The missiles streaked toward the human vessel, their targeting systems locked onto what should have been vulnerable points in the ship's hull. But as they approached, something extraordinary happened. The weapons simply stopped working. Their guidance systems failed, their warheads deactivated, and they drifted harmlessly past their target. "Impossible," whispered the Federation's military observer, watching the display in stunned silence. "Their point defense grid is reacting faster than our targeting computers can acquire locks. They're not just intercepting our weapons, they're disabling them completely." The hegemony's tactical specialist was equally amazed. "Sir, those defensive systems aren't using any energy signatures we recognize. It's like they're manipulating the fundamental forces that make our weapons function." But the real shock was yet to come. Admiral Vextar had saved the final test for last, confident that it would expose the limits of human technology. The Council maintained several obsolete dreadnoughts specifically for these evaluations, massive vessels that could overwhelm smaller ships through sheer firepower and armor thickness. "Final test," Vextar announced. "Combat engagement with Council Dreadnought Terminus. This will be a live-fire exercise using minimal power settings. Prove your vessel can hold its own against a ship of the line." The Terminus was a monster, over 3 kilometers long and massing 10 times more than the human vessel. Its hull was covered in armor, plating thick enough to withstand direct hits from nuclear weapons. Hundreds of weapon ports dotted its surface, each one capable of delivering devastating firepower. Captain Kim accepted the challenge without hesitation. "Understood, Admiral. Beginning engagement." What followed would be analyzed by military strategists for generations to come. The mock battle lasted exactly 28 seconds from start to finish. The Taiguchi moved with impossible grace, dancing around the massive dreadnought like a fighter circling a lumbering giant. The larger ship's weapons tracked desperately, but couldn't achieve target lock on something that moved with such fluid precision. Then the human ship began its attack. Instead of using visible energy beams or missile strikes, the Taiguchi's weapons seemed to phase directly through the dreadnought's shields. One by one, the massive ship's systems began shutting down. First, the weapons arrays went offline. Then, the engines, then the life support backup systems. The Terminus was completely disabled without suffering any apparent damage. Its hull remained intact, its crew unharmed, but every major system had been neutralized with surgical precision. "How?" Admiral Vexistar demanded, his composure finally cracking as he stared at the impossible scene before him. "How did you disable a dreadnought without penetrating its shields? What kind of weapons are you using?" Captain Kim's voice remained calm and professional. "We approached the problem differently, Admiral. Rather than trying to overwhelm your defenses with brute force, we found ways to work around them entirely." The assembled fleet hung in stunned silence. Every military doctrine, every tactical assumption, every strategic principle they had developed over thousands of years had just been rendered obsolete by a species that had achieved interstellar flight less than a decade ago. "We told you they needed to see it with their own eyes," Engineer Lee commented quietly to his fellow crew members. "I don't think words could have prepared them for this." The Council flagship's main conference room had hosted thousands of diplomatic meetings over the centuries, but none quite like this one. The chamber itself was designed to intimidate. Massive curved walls displaying holographic star maps, towering seats that could accommodate dozens of different alien physiologies, and a ceiling that showed the real-time positions of major galactic fleets. Captain Kim entered the room accompanied by his senior staff, their human-sized forms looking almost fragile compared to the imposing alien delegates surrounding them. Commander Yun carried a slim datapad containing their technical briefings, while Chief Engineer Huang had prepared extensive documentation about their ship's capabilities. The atmosphere was tense. Every delegate in the room had witnessed the impossible demonstration outside, and none of them quite knew how to process what they had seen. Species that had dominated galactic space for millennia were suddenly faced with technology that made their greatest achievements look primitive. Councillor Thane took his place at the head of the curved table, his tentacles still twitching with nervous energy. He had overseen hundreds of these recognition ceremonies, but usually they were simple formalities. A new species would show up with a barely functional ship, demonstrate some basic capabilities, and receive polite acknowledgement before being sent on their way. This was different. This was a complete overturning of everything the galactic community thought they understood about warfare and technology. "Your vessel demonstrates remarkable engineering," Councillor Thane began, his voice carefully controlled, though his praise carried an obvious undertone of concern. "The capabilities you've shown today exceed anything in our current databases. We assume this represents your species' most advanced military technology?" The question seemed reasonable enough. Every civilization brought their best ship for council, recognition, their flagship, their most powerful vessel, their crown jewel of military engineering. It was a matter of pride and practical diplomacy. Captain Kim exchanged glances with his officers before responding. The look that passed between them was subtle but meaningful, the kind of silent communication that comes from years of working together under pressure. "Actually," Kim said slowly, "the Teguki was our first attempt at building something we felt would be appropriate for galactic standards. We wanted to make a good impression for our debut in the galactic community." The words hit the assembled delegates like a physical blow. Several species had involuntary reactions. The hegemony representatives' scales rattled, the Federation observers' breathing holes whistled with alarm, and Councillor Thane's tentacles went completely still for the first time anyone could remember. "Your first attempt," Admiral Vextar repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. "That's correct," Commander Yoon confirmed, stepping forward with her datapad. Earth's shipbuilding industry analyzed existing galactic vessel designs and attempted to create something that would meet established standards. We studied the technical specifications of hegemony dreadnoughts, Federation cruisers, and Zephyrian carriers to understand what the galactic community considered acceptable. Chief Engineer Huang activated a holographic display showing cutaway views of the Teguki's internal structure. We started with basic human innovations and adapted them for space warfare. Our hull metallurgy, for example, uses a polymer matrix that can adapt its molecular structure in real time. He manipulated the display to show the hull composition at a microscopic level. The material appeared to be constantly shifting, its atomic bonds rearranging themselves to optimize for different conditions. "When your fighters fired on us," Huang explained, "the hull automatically reconfigured itself to absorb and dissipate the energy. It's not really armor in the traditional sense. It's more like living tissue that responds to threats. The Federation's science officer leaned forward, his multiple eyes wide with fascination and fear. That's impossible. Matter doesn't behave that way. You can't just rearrange molecular structures without massive energy input. We found that assumption to be incorrect, Lieutenant Yoon replied politely. She activated another section of the display showing their power systems. Our energy manipulation technology treats conventional physics as suggestions rather than absolute laws. We discovered that most physical limitations exist because previous researchers accepted them as unchangeable. She showed them energy flow, patterns that seemed to violate thermodynamics, power generation systems that produced more output than input, and propulsion methods that pushed against space-time itself rather than using reaction mass. If this is your first attempt, Admiral, Vextar asked carefully, his voice tight with barely controlled anxiety, what capabilities do your more advanced vessels possess? What does your actual military fleet look like? Captain Kim considered the question thoughtfully before responding. The truth was that Earth had dozens of experimental vessels, each one testing different approaches to the fundamental problems of space warfare. Some were designed for exploration, others for defense, and a few for purposes he wasn't authorized to discuss. We thought it best to start with something modest, Kim replied diplomatically. We didn't want to appear presumptuous or aggressive on our first meeting with the galactic community. The Taegukgi represents what we considered a reasonable compromise between our capabilities and what we thought would be appropriate for diplomatic contact. The implications of his words settled over the council chamber like a cold weight pressing down on everyone present. This modest vessel had just effortlessly outperformed the finest military assets the galaxy had to offer. It had disabled a dreadnought in under 30 seconds, neutralized advanced fighter craft without breaking sweat, and demonstrated technology that violated fundamental laws of physics, and the humans were calling it their opening move. Counselor. Thane's tentacles began moving again, but slowly, like someone in shock trying to process overwhelming information. When you say modest, Captain Kim, exactly how modest are we talking about? Well, Kim said, glancing at his crew again, we didn't want to show up in something that might make other species uncomfortable. Earth's military philosophy emphasizes proportional response and diplomatic consideration. Chief Engineer Huang nodded in agreement. The Taegukgi was specifically designed to be non-threatening while still demonstrating human engineering principles. We avoided incorporating our more dramatic technological developments. More dramatic, whispered the hegemony representative, his scales now rattling continuously. Perhaps, suggested Commander Yoon gently, we should focus on establishing positive diplomatic relations first. There will be plenty of time to discuss technical details once our civilizations get to know each other better. But the damage was already done. Every delegate in the room understood that they were no longer the dominant powers in the galaxy. Humanity had just announced their arrival by casually demonstrating technology that rendered thousands of years of military development obsolete, and they were being polite about it. The recognition ceremony that followed was unlike anything in the Council's long history. What should have been a simple bureaucratic formality, the standard approval given to dozens of species over the centuries, had transformed into something far more significant. Every delegate present understood they were witnessing a moment that would fundamentally reshape galactic politics for generations to come. Admiral Vexitar stood at the ceremonial podium, holding the official recognition documents that would formally acknowledge humanity's place in the galactic community. His hands trembled slightly as he read the traditional words, though everyone in the room knew that nothing about this situation was traditional. By the authority of the Galactic Council, he announced, his voice carrying across the silent chamber, we hereby recognize the Earth vessel Taegukgi as a legitimate military asset and welcome humanity to the community of spacefaring civilizations. The usual applause that followed such ceremonies was notably absent. Instead, the assembled delegates sat in contemplative silence, each one trying to process the implications of what they had witnessed. The hegemony's military observer was frantically taking notes, probably preparing reports for his superiors about the complete obsolescence of their current fleet doctrine. The Federation's diplomatic corps huddled together in quiet conversation, discussing how this development would affect their territorial agreements and trade routes. Captain Kim accepted the recognition documents with quiet dignity, but his words, during the closing remarks, would be remembered and analyzed for decades afterward. "We are honored by this recognition," he began, his voice calm and sincere. "Earth looks forward to peaceful cooperation with all galactic civilizations. We believe deeply in the strength that comes from unity and mutual respect between different species and cultures." He paused, looking around the room at the various alien faces watching him with mixtures of fear, curiosity, and grudging respect. "Humanity has always been at its best when working together with others toward common goals. We hope to bring that same spirit of cooperation to our relationships with our new galactic neighbors. We have much to learn from civilizations that have been exploring the stars for thousands of years, and we hope we might have something valuable to contribute in return." The words themselves were diplomatic and peaceful, carrying no hint of aggression or territorial ambition. But everyone in the room understood the subtext. Humanity had just demonstrated military capabilities that rendered traditional thinking about warfare completely obsolete. Yet they were approaching the galaxy with open hands rather than clenched fists. This was perhaps the most unsettling aspect of the entire encounter. Throughout galactic history, every major technological breakthrough had been followed by conquest and expansion. Species that developed superior weapons used them to dominate their neighbors. Civilizations with advanced ships carved out vast empires through military force. But humanity was offering cooperation instead of conquest, partnership instead of domination. They had shown they could disable any vessel in the galaxy without effort, yet their first instinct was to seek peaceful relations. As the ceremony concluded and the various delegations began to disperse, Captain Kim made his way back to the Taiguchi with his crew. The ship waited for them exactly where they had left it, its sleek hull still causing sensor arrays throughout the fleet to produce confused readings. Engineer Sato took her position at the navigation console, preparing for their departure. The cloaking system that had allowed them to arrive undetected was ready to engage again, though after their demonstration, everyone present would know they were there regardless of what sensors showed. "Beginning departure sequence," she announced to the bridge crew. "Cloaking system standing by." As the Taiguchi began to withdraw from the assembly, Captain Kim stood at the main viewing port, watching the various alien fleets maintain carefully respectful distances. No vessel moved to intercept or follow them. No fighter squadrons launched to escort them to the system boundary. The message had been received and understood. "Think they got the message?" Engineer Sato asked quietly, activating the cloaking sequence. Space began to shimmer around their vessel as advanced stealth systems engaged. Kim nodded slowly, his eyes still fixed on the alien ships growing smaller in the distance. "I believe so. Sometimes the best way to ensure peace is to demonstrate." That war would be inadvisable for everyone involved. The Taiguchi faded from visible sight, becoming once again undetectable to the most advanced sensor arrays in the galaxy. But its impact on galactic civilization was only beginning to be felt. Within hours of the ceremony's conclusion, encrypted communications began flying across hyperspace networks at faster-than-light speeds. The news of humanity's arrival spread through diplomatic channels, military command structures, and intelligence networks with unprecedented urgency. On 1,000 different worlds, military strategists found themselves staring at tactical doctrines that had remained unchanged for centuries, suddenly realizing that everything they thought they knew about space warfare had become obsolete in a single afternoon. Fleet commanders began emergency reviews of their defensive capabilities, trying to understand how they might protect their worlds against weapons that could phase through conventional shielding. Political leaders called emergency sessions to discuss how this development would affect existing alliances, trade agreements, and territorial boundaries. The delicate balance of power that had maintained relative peace in the galaxy for the past few centuries had been completely overturned by the arrival of a single human vessel. But perhaps most significantly, the galaxy's various intelligence services began desperately trying to gather information about Earth's true military capabilities. If the Taguchi represented humanity's modest first attempt at building a galactic standard warship, what did their actual military fleet look like? How many ships did they have? What other technological breakthroughs had they achieved? The questions multiplied faster than answers could be found. Humanity had introduced themselves to the galaxy with a demonstration of overwhelming technological superiority, but had done so with such diplomatic grace that no one quite knew how to respond. Some civilizations began quietly reaching out through diplomatic channels, hoping to establish friendly relations with this new power before anyone else could gain an advantage. Others started crash programs to develop new defensive technologies, though most experts privately doubted that conventional approaches would be effective against human innovations. A few of the more aggressive species considered the possibility of preemptive strikes against Earth, but abandoned such plans after reviewing the tactical recordings from the Taguchi's demonstration. If humanity's modest vessel could disable a dreadnought in under 30 seconds, what would their actual warships be capable of? The galaxy had been irrevocably changed. Humanity had arrived and nothing would ever be the same again.